Hey, I'm Rob Jones for Loop TV, and this tech tip is about the resequencing of drum loops using Ableton Live. So, you've got a drum loop and maybe you want to play it live yourself using a MIDI controller, or use it in a track you're producing, but you want the kicks and the snares to fall on slightly different beats. Well, there are some tricks to doing this with Live that make it really easy and help to work with your creativity to come up with some more interesting and original sounds. I'll show you what I mean.
So first let's find a drum loop. I'm going to take one from Loopmaster's awesome Nick Thayer sample set. This one here, Funky Comp Loop, will work. I'm going to get rid of the second half of the loop so it's just one bar long.
As you can hear, this is already a fairly syncopated or offbeat loop, but I reckon it could be a bit more syncopated by shifting the snares on the second and fourth beats so that it works better as a breakdown or background loop.
Now if you were using any other software, then the way you could do this is by looking at the transients and editing the waveform to separate each one from the others. So you're left with all the individual drum sounds, like so. Now we've got the kick, and the snare, and so on.
Then you can drop those sounds onto the individual pads of a software sampler and play them yourself.
The great thing about Live though is you can do all this fairly time-consuming stuff in one easy move, thanks to the handy submenu. All you do is hold down the Control key on a Mac and click on the waveform, or right-click it on a PC. Then select Slice to New MIDI track from the menu that appears. The options here allow you to choose how the waveform gets sliced. So you've got the whole bar, half the bar, a quarter of the bar, that'd be crotchets or every beat, an eighth or quavers, and so on. If you want to slice the bar up in an irregular way though, you can put in your own warp markers and then select that option from the list. That's what we're going to do. Another handy new feature of Live 8 is the automatic transient select, which places markers on each transient for you, as you can see when I move the mouse cursor over them in the clip view window. So you just need to select them by double-clicking to activate, making sure that my grid is fine enough so that the beats don't get over-quantized or moved about too much when I double-click them. If you want to keep the offbeat feel with little or no quantization, then just zoom into the waveform so that when you double-click the transient marker, the waveform doesn't shift as much. Then, when I've selected all the transients, I just bring up the menu again and select Slice to Warp Markers. Now it chops up the waveform using the warp markers that I've just made, and puts each slice into its own sampler in a drum rack, which it creates on a new MIDI track in Live.
So you can play those sounds using a MIDI controller, if you have one connected.
It also creates a MIDI file on that track, which sequences those slices in the same way as the original drum loop, as you can see on my grid here. This means that you can play around with the slices to create different patterns. For example, I can select all, and then make each slice the same length by trimming with the mouse, first reducing the length of each clip, and then increasing it. This creates a clip sound similar to gating. Then I can hold down Alt, which is like copying and pasting, and create a repetition of the pattern on another beat to produce a delay. Or I can just resequence some of the sounds. Now, as each of the slices is put onto its own separate track in the Live mixer, I can change the levels of each one. And even add different effects if I want, so maybe a delay on the first snare. When I'm done playing around, I just bring up the menu again and choose Freeze Track. Then bring it up once again and choose Flatten. Now I have a brand new audio sample with the drums resequenced the way I want. Sweet.
So now you can take any of your favourite drum loops and rearrange them in any way you want. See you in the next edition for more tech tips on Loop TV.